The narcissist will come back like nothing happened. The narcissist will want the situation to return to normal after the disruption that they have caused, after all of the chaos and drama, and the bizarre and ridiculous way in which they choose to act. They will choose to ignore the existence of past events by pretending that nothing abnormal happened, even though they never took accountability for their actions. They never faced justice, and they never tried to correct the situation. And yet they will return appearing casually calm and relaxed, without displaying any overall anxiety, interest or enthusiasm. They act calm, cool and unconcerned, as though they're not worried about anything, or as though they do not care. They will play it off. They will act as though it didn't bother them, or as though it didn't happen. They will act as though everything is normal. They will brush it aside. They will deny embarrassment. They will dismiss or disregard any accusations or confrontation. They will handle it with grace. They will keep a straight face. They may even laugh it off and make a joke of it. Or they will overlook it and pay no attention to it. Or they will play it down and play it cool. Because they are manipulating you. They will never accept accountability for anything, because they don't want to do the work, so their role is to convince you that they're not the problem, but instead you are. Because then, at least in their heads, they can remain the good victim. They can remain secure in their helplessness. Because if they can get you to doubt yourself and change your ways for them, then they can control you for their own means. Which is why they must avoid accountability and responsibility at all costs. They cannot think or feel beyond themselves. Because otherwise they would see their own wrongdoings. They would see how their behaviour affects those around them. So now they can only think of themselves. They can only focus on their own self-serving interests, which means that they have to see themselves as perfect and superior, as someone who is incapable of making mistakes, which locks them into a fantasy world of their own making, where they're having to resort to manipulation tactics such as denial, projection, blame shifting and gaslighting whenever you try to hold them accountable. They have to convince you that your anger or your attempt to assert boundaries to their abuse is actually you abusing them, in order for them to maintain their false persona. Because it can only ever be fake. They're only pretending like nothing happened. The reality is that certain acts were committed and certain events did take place. So they are counterfeit. An imitation which is only intended to deceive you about their true character and nature, because they don't know how to resolve conflict. And they are unable to face and accept the reality of the situation. So in order for them to maintain their false persona, they have to continue shifting the blame and deflecting their shame onto you, while simultaneously punishing you. Because this is what keeps the illusion going. But what becomes problematic is your self-trust in your experiences, and your memories of what happened, to where you may remember how they behaved. You may remember that what they did to you was real and true. So then they have to gaslight you. They have to get you to doubt yourself. They have to make you think that you are your own worst enemy. They have to cause you to lose trust in yourself, because yourself is the enemy to their false reality. Your authenticity exposes them. It reveals their faults, flaws and defects, because while they may act as though nothing happened, or as though their behaviour was justified, deep down they know that there is something wrong with them. And this is why they're so insecure about it. But they may come back acting as though nothing is wrong. or as though they're happy and they have nothing to worry about, or as though they're calm and unconcerned, when really they're crazy, they're delusional. Which is how in one moment they may seem happy, and it may seem like everything is fine, but then they suddenly become wild and aggressive. They become unbalanced, unhinged, or they become passive aggressive, where they covertly push or provoke you to get a reaction from you. Because they're out of their minds, they've lost control of their mental faculties, they're suffering from a severe mental condition. And of course they would be, because just remember the things they did to you. No normal person would think that is acceptable, but they behave this way because they want to be away from the focus of their thoughts. They don't want anything to do with themselves. And it's not because you did anything to them. It's the results of things that they have done to you. They can't live with themselves, because they recognize that they have done something very wrong, and they often become aware of it, which causes them to feel shame. And the shame is too painful for them to deal with, so they deflect it onto you. They engage in splitting. They impose a false defective character onto you, so that they can prop up this delusion of them being perfect, when the true reality is that they are a manipulative abuser who cannot accept themselves, and you are the unsuspecting victim. But sometimes they will let their mask slip if they can shame you for what they did to you, and if it makes you feel you're substandard or inferior. But that only works if they can get you to agree with it. It only works if they can get you to be delusional just like them. Because who affected you? Who caused you to have undesirable or negative qualities? And of course it always goes back to them, because they made a choice a long time ago to continue on this path of destruction while disidentifying from their own behaviours. So it's all an illusion. They are the product of the ill-intentioned things that they have done to you, things that were intended to cause harm, things that were intended to cause injury, hurt, pain, suffering. That's who they are. They just don't want to accept themselves. So they will come back like nothing happened, to avoid shame and accountability. And sometimes they may do something very reckless and extreme, and then in the next moment they will act like they didn't do anything wrong. They may yell and scream at you for hours, and then seconds later they will pretend like it never happened, which may make you feel like you're going crazy, because you're taking accountability for them. You're thinking that maybe you had a wrong perception, which is not the right thing to do, especially when you're dealing with a narcissist, because they are crazy and delusional. They're not grounded in reality. So you need to accept that you are dealing with a crazy person. You are dealing with someone who is mentally ill, someone who will do something, take no accountability for it, and then they may even blame you. They are not connected to reality, and this is why they engage in extreme foolishness and irrationality. It's why they engage in very stupid, unreasonable and dangerous actions, because they have a distorted state of mind. They're unable to think in a clear or sensible way. They couldn't function in reality, so they created a fantasy world inside their heads. They engaged in splitting, where they then saw you as all bad and themselves as all good. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that as a coping mechanism. But where it becomes problematic is when they bring their delusions into the external world. Because then it results in them thinking that they can do whatever they like without taking any accountability for it. It makes it impossible for them to maintain an authentic self, because who they are in their heads is very different to who they are in real life. And this is why it's almost impossible to hold them accountable, because they don't want anything to do with their true selves. They're chameleons. They change their opinions and behaviour according to the situation. They drift through life with no established residence within their bodies or minds. They feel a lack of meaning and purpose, because they lack courage, which is how they will often show feelings of anxiety and unsettlement to where they may seek to cause agitation, commotion, disturbance or excitement. Because they're drifters. They have no character. So they may do something to you, but by the time you try to hold them accountable, they're already a completely different person. They've disowned all of the previous behaviours, associations and connections that they once had with you without any accountability. They just cast it aside. They refuse to acknowledge it as their own, but this is only in their minds. They're still the same twisted, mentally ill person who did those things to you, which means that wherever they go, they're still going to suffer from the same symptoms that caused them to do what they did to you. They just need an opportunity, a way to justify it, or the presumption that they're going to get away with it. And they will do it because they're sick in their mind. There is nothing stopping them because they lack character. They lack mental and moral qualities. They have no true persona. So they can do anything. And then they will go off acting cheerful and lively, and they will seem briskly self-assured. Because they're running from the shame and accountability of who they actually are. And this is the reason why they do everything they do. They're experiencing overwhelming pain, which is how they can do these things to you, and they pretend like nothing happened. Because if they were to accept what happened, if they were to confront it and try to deal with it, it would be completely devastating and demoralizing for them. They just wouldn't have the strength to overcome it. Because they are deeply ashamed of their actions. They're ashamed of all of those times they screamed and yelled at you. It reveals their insecurities. It reveals times when they did not have full control over themselves or their actions. Which is debilitating for a narcissist. Because they know they had no right to do that to you. Which is why sometimes they may just give you the silent treatment. They will do whatever they have to do. Whatever is the easiest way for them to avoid accountability. And they won't ever want you to bring it up. They won't ever want you to mention it again. Or to raise the matter for discussion or consideration. Because it's extremely embarrassing for them. It makes them feel self-conscious. And they do not want to feel conscious of themselves. They're trying to run away from themselves. Which is how they may bring it up to you. They may use past events or past things that they have done to taunt you, to harass you with persistent criticism, to provoke, deride you with mockery and contempt. Because by bringing it up to you, it then allows them to deflect their shame by making it your problem, instead of seeing it as something that they should be accountable for. Which is just another thing that makes dealing with them very difficult. Because while they may use past events to taunt you, they're not actually going to want to talk about it. They see it as though if they don't talk about it, it goes away. When really by doing that, they're just sweeping more and more under the rug. They're concealing more and more things that they don't want to be discovered. Until it gets to a point where it just becomes more and more apparent that something is seriously wrong. Something doesn't make sense. At first there may be one incident, and that became the big lie that they told. That became the big elephant in the room. But then they do so many things wrong, and they tell so many lies, that now there's more elephants in the room than anything else. There's so many elephants that you can't even fit inside the room anymore. There's so many discussions that are off limits, that there's not so much to talk about anymore. And it may even get to a point where you can't even speak a single sentence without them getting paranoid and taking it in reference to something they may have done. Because they have so many skeletons in the closet. They have so many discreditable and embarrassing facts that they wish to keep secret. So it gets to a point where you can't even have a normal conversation anymore. You can't say anything without triggering their shame. Because they've done so many things wrong and so few things right. And they also don't want to talk about the things they've done wrong. It's like whenever they begin their next course of action, You already have to plan ahead for the next calamity, because everything they try to accomplish always results in disaster. It always goes wrong, which is why they're always angry. They're always falling apart, even when you're doing something for them, or if they're blaming you for something, or even if they're just beginning to do something. It's always just a matter of time until they explode, because they've experienced it so many times before. So they know that as a result of their uncontrollable emotions and the way in which they behave, nothing is ever going to go well for them. They're always going to find some way to screw it up. And then they're always going to have to lie about it or give you the silent treatment, and then blame you for everything. And of course, by them doing that, nothing is ever going to get resolved, because they're not taking accountability. They're not working on themselves. And they don't want you to have any sort of advantage over them, because they want to remain in control. Which means that you will never be able to hold them accountable. So they're going to remain immoved, and they're just going to experience the same problems again, because no one wants to deal with someone who won't take accountability. They're miserable, rotten, angry people who just end up blaming you for everything. So they just end up with people who assume the best in them, people who are unaware, people who don't see the real them, people who they have coerced and trapped, or people who don't have anywhere else to go. Thank you for watching. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Hit the subscribe button to receive the notifications. If you would like to support the channel, you can donate at paypal.me/Narc Survivor. You can book a one-on-one with me on my website. It's narcsurvivor.co.uk. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.